Open your mind.
Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
Myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
Good evening. We are in Studio 2 tonight for a change. We just thought we'd have a little bit of a change. So we're in Studio 2. Right, our guest on tonight is a chap that we had on just before Christmas for half a show, which is Tony Gosling. And Tony is a journalist, a radio broadcaster, and he used to work for the BBC as well. So we're going to be bringing Tony in about 10 minutes. We'll be touching base with Tony and finding out what's been going on in the world. But before we do that, let's find out what the communication channels are.
Okay, communication channels this evening are as follows.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Yes, the phone number again, 046 927 1212. If you want to ring in from outside the Republic of Ireland, sorry. The phone number is 046 927 1212. However, we're in Studio 2, so the phone number is 046 927 1204. It may work and it may not work if you do decide to ring in. Please be patient. We also have the chat room as well. Both chat rooms, OYMradio.com, you will see the link there for the chat room, and also peoplesinternetradio.com as well. We're going to monitor both of those chat rooms for questions for our guest this evening. And your comments, you're welcome to comment as well. What else have we got? We have the Tune In Radio link application. If you want to check us out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and sure, why wouldn't you? That is available on the website as well. It's a free download, so just check it out. And as I say, most weeks, if you're listening to us either on the live show or on the podcast, and if you are a new listener, you've just discovered OYM, and if you like what you hear, or even if you don't like what you hear, drop us an email, info@oymradio.com, and we'll get back to you. Thanks, Alan.
Cheers, Steve. Okay, just quickly, just to say thank you to the people that made a donation this week, and the people who make a regular donation. You know who you are. Donations are few and far between, but when they do come in, we're very happy to receive them because they do keep the actual wheels in motion. So you know who you are. A big thank you to for them donations. And let's go on to number 2, right, the White House. Right, press secretary. I don't know if you've seen this, but the new press secretary for Donald Trump came out. And he said... He didn't come out. He came out, he had a moan, basically, at the media, saying that their reporting is always negative. He said, when we are right, say we are right. When we are wrong, say we are wrong. But he said, you always seem to put a negative spin on things. And we know the mainstream media love bad news because bad news sells papers. Good news doesn't seem to sell papers for whatever reason.
Well, that's true. I mean, if you go into up to a newsstand and it says, you see the headline, everything is fine, nothing to see here, well, you won't buy the paper, will you?
Yeah, here's a paper with all good news. I don't want that. I want to hear bad news. I don't know what it is in the human psyche. It's just the way things are. Maybe Tony can tell us, being involved in broadcasting. We'll touch base with Tony in a few minutes. But so yeah, it was interesting that he came out and did that. And when he was doing the press conference, he actually went for the smaller media, the people from the small media newspapers and the alternative media, I believe, rather than going for the like the CNN, CBS and Fox News and stuff like that, which again is refreshing and great to see. And he's still using the Twitter account, putting information up. Now, we do know that he's gone and used did an executive order for the Dakota pipeline, which a lot of people are not happy about, and I'm surprised he actually did that. Maybe we'll be able to find out something. Maybe we'll talk to Tony later and see the geopolitical world and what's going on with that, with Trump. We're going to be talking to Tony about it, so maybe we can include that in the conversation. But, Steve?
Yeah, we have some news and also an update from Integrity Ireland. People who are aware of Integrity Ireland, it's run by Stephen Manning and a lot of other great people. Well, Stephen's sister was asked by Stephen to inform the people that at 5:04 p.m. Today, and that was Monday the 23rd of January, at Ballyhaunis train station, Stephen was approached by three Gardaí after returning from the Dublin Supreme Court to try and get some action against being obstructed and blocked by civil servants and judges in the court. The date for the court case being held in Castlebar, Stephen Manning and Colm Grennan, has been moved from Thursday the 26th of Jan to this morning. Manning was arrested this evening with a flawed warrant, it says, signed by Judge Anus. That must be that has to be wrong.
That wasn't me. I copied and pasted.
You got that off the news wire, did you?
I did,
I'm guessing it must be Angus maybe, but Judge McCarthy will say, for contempt of court. As he was not present this morning at Castlebar Courthouse. Neither Stephen Manning nor Colm Grennan were informed of this, despite the warrant stating that Manning was successfully served and subpoenaed. Stephen is currently being held in Claremorris Garda Station and will be overnight and will appear in court at 10 a.m. in Castlebar Courthouse. All support is appreciated, thank you. Again, that was from Stephen Manning's sister. We also have an update. The update says, no plea ever entered by Stephen, legal aid granted but then not allowed, applications for witnesses denied, court orders defied by the state prosecutor, Vincent Dean, lies, perjury, forged documents accepted by Judge McCarthy, evidence of serious criminal misconduct by senior Gardaí, court services staff and the DPP's office as Director of Public Prosecutions, completely ignored, and then a quick switcheroo of the hearing dates, and bingo, Colm and Stephen are found guilty in their absence without even entering their rock-solid defences, and have now received sentences of 2 months each in jail from Judge McCarthy. Even though Colm is undergoing heart surgery. Absolutely ridiculous, scandalous and revolting behaviour by yet another of our highly overpaid criminal district court judges. In collusion with the powers that be, criminal complaints and appeals are of course being filed again. So I suppose watch this space for more updates.
That's terrible. That really
it's
is.
Unreal.
It goes to
only
show
in
you.
Ireland.
Yeah, only, well, no, other countries as well. But this is the cesspit of corruption that we are dealing with in Ireland. Are you guaranteed a fair court, fair justice in court? Over here, chances are no. If it's something trivial, then you might be okay. But when it comes to you challenging the system, they won't. They all enclose. It's all a game. They're all in the gang. So all the funny handshake club. So, you know, regards and best wishes to Stephen and Colm. And we'll try and get more news and find out what's going on there. How's your week, Steve?
Yeah, not much to report on my week, I have to say. But I did have a phone conversation with a certain gentleman who shall remain nameless during the week. He knows who he is and he's listening in. And we discussed ayahuasca, because that's something that has come up on the chat room many, many times, and it has come up kind of on the radar, but I never really looked into it. But after having a phone conversation with this gentleman during the week, I'd done some research, and I've done a lot of research actually, because I wanted to see the good and the bad in relation to the ayahuasca. And I have to say, there's a lot of great documentaries out there, and a lot of people who have actually taken the, as they call it, the medicine, and had the experience on the medicine, and exactly what it entailed. I actually thought it was kind of, you know, you take it, you get high, like kind of like an LSD type thing. You take it, you get high, you have some hallucinations, and you come back down. But I have to say that the information that I received during the week, both from the phone call and also from the research that I've done, kind of let you know that it's not to be messed with. That it's a medicine that when you do take it, it can last for 4 to 6 hours. And possibly longer, but it does kind of, any demons that you have in your life, it opens you up to kind of all sorts of things, and you do have a trip, and some people have a good trip and some people have a bad trip, but from what I have seen and heard, everyone who has taken the ayahuasca, they would definitely do it again. One man has actually done it more than 30 times, and his wife and kids have done it as well, and it's definitely a life-changing experience. So it's something that I'm gonna look into it further, and with the help of obviously researching on the internet, and also the gentleman who I spoke with during the week, we're gonna just maybe look into it some more. And who knows, maybe it might be a road that we may eventually go down, just so we can say we done it. Alan's giving me funny looks here at the moment.
Yeah, I can see you coming in with a flower in your hair and going
I can see you with a flower up your Anyway, yeah, so it's just something that I've been looking into. I say it has come up on the chat room many, many times. It has came across my radar several times as well, but kind of again, like the Pain Genie, I wasn't in the zone. So I've done some research this week, and I will continue research next week. And you never know. Hopefully, at some point in time, maybe myself and Alan will partake in this medicine and see what it's all about, and live to tell the tale.
In for a penny, in for a pound, as you say.
Well, it's a little bit more than a penny. Anyway, right, how's your week?
Not too bad. Just before we get Tony on, just a couple of things. Now, we had we were hoping to have David Icke on the show, and due to lack of communication or an issue with the communication, we couldn't get David on, and we had to get an alternative guest on, and we got Thomas on, which is great. Now, we did get in contact with Gareth and Jamie, who are David's sons. We went to David Icke last week, by the way, myself and Steve, 12 and a half hours. That's a long time. I mean, I don't know how David managed to be on stage for 12 and a half hours to talk about the information, but he did. Fair play to him.
Our bums or no, might say his feet were killing him.
He had the stamina to be on stage for that long. Loads of information to talk about. And so we emailed Gareth and Jamie, and we wanted to clarify what happened. And it basically was a miscommunication. And I have to say, Gareth and Jamie got back to me straight away. They were very fast in getting back to us. And basically, what happened was David's travel plans were all changed around, and Jamie was up to his eyes trying to sort out the travel plans for David. So I can understand why he was that actually had to be a priority, because he had shows booked and everything else like that. So basically what we said was we would try and get David in. Jamie said he'll try and arrange for David to come on in the early summer, which would be fantastic, So I will send Jamie an email probably in the early summer in a couple of months' time, and we'll try and book David in and get him on the show, and we'll try and do a full show. And so fair play to Garrett and Jamie for getting back to us very fast. Cheers for that. And the last thing on the list before we get Tony on is I watched that movie, Arrival. It was a movie made last year, 2016, Arrival, and similar to Independence Day, except it was 10 times more boring. And it's basically 1 hour and 56 minutes of my life I will never get back. I don't recommend it. It was boring. There was no...
The trailer looked amazing.
I know, they always do that. Seriously, it's, I kind of, after watching the movie, I kind of said, now, the money that was put in to that movie could have been really used to something much better. Because it just... Well, I don't know, that's just my opinion.
But was there a message? Did you learn anything new after watching it?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it's... No.
Definitely not. Definitely.
Okay.
For me, it's a waste of time, but unfortunately you have to watch these things, and that's 1 hour and 56 minutes I won't get back. Anyway, but if you want to watch yourself and make up your own mind, that's fine. You might like it yourself, but I'm just giving you my opinion on it anyway. Okay, without further ado, we'll get Tony on. Now, Tony, excuse me, was on the show last year. We did a half show with Tony. And Tony is a journalist, radio broadcaster, and he worked for the BBC. So he has loads of background information of things that's going on, and we had a great chat with him last year. So he asked him to come back on the show to do a full show this evening, so we can really get into some subjects and talk about them. So good evening, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm really looking forward to this live ayahuasca trip broadcast. That sounds very interesting. Good bit of radio.
I don't know whether we'll be doing it live, because we might be...
Come on.
Oh, that would be scary.
Doing it live. Imagine doing it live, the ayahuasca experience, doing it live.
Yeah, I think if you were to trail it a few weeks beforehand and then do a little live ayahuasca trip, you'd be interesting. I'd say this stuff is really, quite dangerous. My experience of the various people who've had it, this is all these hallucinogenic drugs are extremely, they can tip you over the edge quite easily. Do all your research, and the other thing I would say is anything to do, particularly with any kind of drugs really, but particularly hallucinogenics, is a little tiny bit, and then it's kind of baby steps. Yeah, have a little teeny weeny bit, of whatever drug it is. I mean, you can't stop people doing this stuff. They're going to do it, illegal or not. But that is the only way, I think, to do it. Because my experience of people who've had this stuff is that you're having, you've never had it before, and then all of a sudden you've got a sort of, full dose of it. It's not the way to do it. Have a little bit of time. The other thing is, major thing is that for a lot of people who've gotten into this in a big way, is the hallucination becomes the reality. They think that what they're seeing when they're tripping is in some way the real world, so you get people can really go off on one in a massive way and completely lose it. So, extreme caution. It's probably wise that the stuff's illegal because it is actually very dangerous. And the third thing is, very, very small amounts to begin with. Certainly, if anyone feels they absolutely have to have it, legal or illegal. So, that's my two halfpence on that subject. But also, back in the 60s and 70s, mainly the 60s, they did some broadcasts, of people who were on this stuff as a sort of experiment, which is fascinating to watch. They even did, of course, I don't know if you've seen it, this LSD trip of the British Army trying to sort of feed the birds. Basically, that's what they ended up doing. But it was seriously considered as a weapon of war, and it probably is in some way. Still being thought of as that in order to kind of disable the population. And if you've come across John Potash's book, which is called Drugs as Weapons Against Us, he explains, I think very, very well, how the whole sort of anti-Vietnam War movement was destabilised by the use of, particularly of LSD, but other drugs as well, and that the people like Jimi Hendrix were fed this stuff in order to kind of, I suppose, dilute their anti-war message, and then also that by controllers, by people who were very close to the intelligence services. A lot of these artists were being fed the drugs by them.
Yeah, I was just going to, just thinking about that, the whole LSD thing and the flower power. And it depends whether you have a good trip or a bad trip. The last thing you want to be seeing is big black spiders crawling on the roof above your head and what have you. It depends on the trip. Now, I don't know whether ayahuasca works that way, like LSD. And I'm not speaking from experience. I just heard stories of people going on a bad trip and seeing things that they don't want to see. So I don't know whether ayahuasca works the same way. I don't know what feedback you got, Steve.
Feedback that I've seen are from the people who are directly involved in it. They say it's not actually a drug. It's two plants, and the plants are perfectly legal. They say, obviously depending on where you are. But you mixed a leaf of one plant with the bark, or I think it was the bark or twigs from another plant, and it makes like a gooey syrup. But I agree what Tony says. Obviously you don't want to kind of go at this full tilt and just take the recommended dose. I think baby steps would be applicable. I think, but some people do say that they have had bad experience. Like there was actually a BBC documentary done on it as well, where two BBC lads, they went out and met up with a shaman, and they drank it. One guy, there was kind of these drawings on a cave, and he spent hours looking at these drawings on a cave, and he was deciphering them basically, in his mind. But the other guy,
he thought he was,
yeah.
Yeah, so there's a real mixture of you've got insight, but also your mind is just like, it's basically a kind of semi-dream state. So your hallucinations can make you think that you're seeing something incredibly profound when actually it's complete garbage.
There you go.
Well, I suppose that's a possibility, but I say some people are saying. I just find it fascinating. I'm not saying I believe everything I hear.
I agree.
But is it opening up pathways in the brain that have been closed, and maybe we're seeing more of what is there?
Seeing different realities by taking the actual drug.
We don't know.
It's interesting. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and everything else that goes with it. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts. They were a lot of people, especially computer programmers and stuff, in the 70s. A lot of the stuff that we have today is from a lot of people tripping out in the 70s and seeing things that are like outside their reality, and then coming down and after the trip and saying, oh, we're going to work on that. So I know that's, we have a lot of things based, to say, well, I suppose to thank for, to a certain extent. I don't know what other negative stuff has come out of that. But anyway, let's crack on with the geopolitical jigsaw that we're dealing with at the moment. Now, Tony, last time we spoke on the show, Trump was not in, And we had a general talk about that. Now that he's in, and he's signing executive orders left, right, and centre. And there's a lot of people actually a bit concerned about it because the protests are still going on. And the reason why I do think we should talk about it is because I think it has a major impact globally, and I think we can all agree on that. Just because we're in Ireland doesn't mean that we're not going to be affected by it. I think it's going to have a major impact. And there's a lot of people concerned about certain things. Now, he's written a few executive orders, and I'd say fair play to him for doing that. Okay, I can understand that, and well done. But the things like the Dakota pipeline, for one, he's resurrected that, and a lot of people aren't happy about that. And what he's doing now with the whole shutting down the borders and everything else, I don't know. I think is he trying to do what's best, or is he thinking of America, or is he still being controlled and manipulated like when Obama came in? I don't know. What's your take on it, Tony?
Well, anyone that thinks that Trump is going to really make any kind of positive difference is a fool, because the system is set up by which almost every successive president in the US, and actually it's not that dissimilar in Britain, and I don't think it's that dissimilar in Ireland. The potential candidates for presidency are selected beforehand by a super elite. We're talking about the people who are so rich that they could never spend all the money that they've got, and their real interest is not in money, it's in power. And of course, control over a political system is a great prize. Now, Trump is really, I think, the sort of character from business that the Republican Party have been looking at as a kind of someone who will be seen as an outsider. That is to say, that they can put him forward as some kind of anti-establishment candidate, even though actually he is part of the establishment. I mean, there's a great article by William Engdahl about Trump's Mafia connections and Mafia roots. And he, I think, I mean, this is only my personal opinion, but I think he's been selected, and through my knowledge of how things work in the US particularly, as the person who will be a war president. Now, I don't say that lightly. I really think that this guy is the sort of chap who would take the US to war, is belligerent, is quite bullying. I mean, the thing with Hilary Clinton is she was a known quantity, and I don't say that in a positive way. I mean, we know that she would have been doing all sorts of stuff behind the scenes, sacrificing ambassadors, pushing regime change, very anti-Russia, etc.
Yeah.
And really, the only positive thing you can say about Donald Trump is that he's a bit of an unknown quantity as a politician. So rather than known to be thoroughly corrupt and wicked in terms of, killing people in the Middle East and other parts of the world ruthlessly, in order to gain and extend the US empire, Trump is a bit of an unknown quantity. What is he going to do? And that is really all he's got going for him. So, but I'm not at all surprised to see his this blocking of refugees. It is a great. I mean, it's really wonderful actually to see how the US people have reacted to this, because the irony of all of this is that it's US foreign policy in the Middle East which has caused this refugee crisis. I mean, there's other aspects to it too, but it's mainly US adventurism and a wish for regime change in Syria and elsewhere that's caused this absolute devastation of people's homes and homelands. And now he has the affront to say, well, these people who are now destitute cannot seek somewhere safe in America. We have a nice little, reasonably set up country here with fairly high living standards, etc. And those people who we've devastated are going to have to stay devastated or go somewhere else. So I just think it's brilliant to see the American people doing these protests and stuff immediately, spontaneously, straight away. Now, the whole business of economic migration, I think, is something completely different, and he's got some justification to that. But stopping refugees is absolutely appalling. Okay.
Well, I've been watching the news, and it's not. I do agree that he's, the US is in there and they're bombing the hell out of their own the countries, and they've. obviously when you start moving them outside the country, they want to leave and go to safer climes. I mean, that would be just automatic for anybody. If it was any of our families and our country's going to be bombed, you want to get out and go somewhere safe, and then they're stopping them from going in. But I think there's the element, which is what he's probably referring to, I'm going to be devil's advocate here, is because we've seen an awful lot of male refugees who have been recognised as some of the people causing the problem in the first place. Because you know that a lot of these, like ISIS is funded by America, so and the CIA. So basically, they
know exactly who these people are because they're paying their paychecks along with the Saudis and some actually some by the Turks as well. They know who they are. The real problem, the biggest enemy of the United States is not Syrians, it's not Iran or anything like that, or China or Russia, it's Israel. The Israeli state is this parasitic, organisation really, which is feeding off of the US money. And if you have a look at a lot of the people, the training that's been going into Al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda, or the Al-Qaeda franchise as they'd like to call it, like it's a McDonald's or something. Yeah. In Syria, has been by the Israelis. Israelis giving medical help and attention, keeping these people okay if they've been shot or whatever, looking after them, and also this a massive Zionist lobby in the US, which is putting pressure on to get the capital of Israel moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. These are all really key, crucial ways in which the Israelis are actually really trying to get the US, and very successfully getting the US embroiled in their own plans for the Middle East. That is to say, the Oded Yinon plan from the 1980s to balkanize the Middle East, to break up Syria, to break up Iraq, which has been very successful, and in order so that Israel has got room to expand, a bit like Hitler and his Lebensraum in the late 1930s, early 1940s, saying, we just need more space to live. The Israeli settlement program is exact, I think, equivalent of that today. So all this pointing the finger at Muslims, at whatever, these Syrian refugees or Syrian so-called terrorists or whatever, I think it's complete nonsense. I mean, my analysis of the 7/7 London bombings, it makes it pretty clear that there's no evidence whatsoever to pin that on the 4 people that they pinned it on. So what we're doing is we're pointing the finger at the Muslims, just as Hitler pointed the finger at the Jews.
Yeah. Well, I know that Nick Kolstrom and Anthony Hill, John Anthony Hill, which John's been on the show, which he likes being called now, have some information. They've done a lot of research and they've released DVDs regarding it. And Jar was actually arrested and brought over. He was extradited over to the UK and locked up in the scrubs for about 100 days. And then he was under house arrest. I don't know whether you heard about that, Tony, but all because he sent a DVD to the judge, because there's something in the law that says if you are aware of any information that can help a case, then there's an entitlement in society that you have to tell the information that you have. So John put the DVD together and sent it into the judge, and he extradited him over, but they couldn't get him. He knew the system well enough to actually get off, but basically they destroyed his life because everything that went over with John, because he had to kind of move over there, they had to take all his bits over as part of the evidence. And when he actually won the case, he said, right, you're going to pay for shipping all that back over to Ireland. And they said, no, we're not. And they just left him high and dry, and he'd get everything organised. So it's just madness. The whole system. You probably heard the story that we read out earlier about, there's a group over here called Integrity Ireland who are challenging the system on a regular basis. And they're just basically trying to do the best they can to lock up 2 guys, Stephen and Colm, who are trying to use the law to the best ability and not going to bypass anything. And the system is just trying to duck and dive to try and get them locked up, to get them out of the way. And it's
Well,
just scandalous.
We know in Britain that the law is only for the poor, effectively. It's something that just does simply not apply to the wealthy, to the rich people. And the most stark, obvious example of that is the cheating by the Tory party in the 2015 general election. We've got 30 different constituencies where there was fraudulent submissions of election expenses, where in all those constituencies it looks as if there was a considerable amount of overspending in that constituency. So that effectively means there should be prosecutions of the people involved. Well, what's happened actually is that the UK Independence Party, the Labour Party and the Scottish National Party, for tiny little infringements, have all been prosecuted. But hey presto, for the 30 Conservative MPs who got elected on a fraudulent amount of spending, overspending in their constituencies, not a single one of them has been prosecuted. It's a really stark reminder that the law only applies to the people who aren't part of the rich elite establishment, particularly when they seem to be, cooking up a whole load of, there's another whole load of gerrymandering going on in Britain I'm not sure you're aware of, which is this electoral boundary changes, all based on these fraudulent, I'd say fraudulent anyway, electoral registers, because lots of people have been kicked off the electoral register. All the poorest people, most of the students in Britain are not on the electoral register now because they're only in temporary accommodation, and it's actually quite complicated to get yourself registered. So they're now saying, well, we're going to redraw all the boundaries on these new, on the basis of all these new lists, which means there's immediately going to be skewing away from from poor people generally in the first past the post system. So they're doing everything they can to hang on to power, cheating in every single way possible. Also spending loads of money on encouraging people to, if they're Conservative voters, to use their postal vote, for example, if they're abroad. Loads of different ways that they're doing this. And we don't have a fair system. There is no interest in it being sportsmanlike. I know it sounds a little bit cliched, but, in actually allowing the best party to win. And what you get with that is you get a kind of Trump type situation where you've got an extremist president, and I don't think anybody, certainly in a 6 months' time, is going to think anything other than Trump being an extremist, because he's going to be really pushing the boundaries of American exceptionalism. It's America number one. It's going to be that sort of attitude, but only on a very slim majority. What you're doing is you're actually testing to see whether you can actually hang on to power in a country, of course, where most people, or many people certainly, have guns, So you're almost asking for civil. We've had this arrest of journalists as well. I don't know if you've seen that, 6 journalists. I think one was released yesterday at the Women's March last weekend. And these people are being threatened with £25,000 charge, £25,000 fines and 10 years in jail. Now, this is not democracy. If you're going to just arrest people for trying to report on rioting and say that they are actually doing the rioting, no, they're reporting on the rioting. This is the sort of thing you might expect in China or in Egypt or other sort of military dictatorship. But this is where we're going with Trump. And I would also point to a particularly good article by Pepe Escobar, which was a few days ago in the South China Morning News. The headline is, Trump will try to smash the China-Russia-Iran triangle, and here's why he will fail. Now, what Pepe Escobar's done there is he's really explained why. There's a lot of people saying, Trump is not really listening to Kissinger. What Pepe Escobar's doing is saying, yes, he is, actually, because Kissinger's man is this guy Rex Tillerson, who's the new Secretary of State, and he's very close to Kissinger, and so he's basically, this is the former chief of ExxonMobil, chief executive, who's now Secretary of State. And what he's going to be doing, and in the article, as he explains, it looks as if the focus now is going to be, because ExxonMobil have been doing these deals with the Russian oil companies, that the focus is going to be on China. And the whole purpose of that is to try to be nicey to the Russians and try to get them to abandon their very close links and ties to Iran, to try and I suppose, divide and rule, to separate off Iran,
Yeah.
so they can pick off Iran, because they still really want to do that for really effectively for the Israelis.
Yeah.
This is doing for the Israeli lobby to weaken any kind of opposition to Israel in the Middle East. So I think that's what we're going to be seeing, and all these words from Rex Tillerson have not been helping, because the Chinese have now been. I was reading in the Independent yesterday, moving their ballistic missiles up towards the United States. Now, this is not what the US public want, to have a whole new set of nuclear ballistic missiles chugging up the Chinese mainland towards the within range of continental United States. So he's provoking China in 3 different places. One is it's been going on a low level with Obama, but it looks like under Trump this is ramping up already. One is in Taiwan, because there is this whole sort of one China policy whereby the US basically completely ignores Taiwan. It's now starting to say, well, we think Taiwan's very important, blah, blah, blah. This is just making mess. It's provocative towards the Chinese. Let's just keep things as they are, then there won't be a war. But no, the Trump administration doesn't seem to want to do that. Tillerson doesn't want to do that. And the other one, of course, is the Korean Peninsula. I mean, enormous, with North Korea, etc. And the third one is the Spratly Islands and the South China Sea. So in all those 3 areas, the US is starting to get a little bit more provocative. Also, I noticed I don't know how I caught this in the news, but the Chinese moving their warships into the Persian Gulf for the first time as well. So, the Chinese are reacting to the rhetoric of Tillerson and the new regime. And I don't know where this sort of thing can just kind of almost escalate without people meaning it to. But if they seem to also, this is another thing, just occurs to me now, is they're making this policy in public. What are they doing? What are they doing? Sort of shouting and screaming and beating their chests in public about, oh yeah, we don't like the Chinese, we're going to start poking them, What the hell are they doing that for? That really, really worries me, that this sort of stuff should be being done maybe in diplomatic circles, not on the national news.
Yeah, well, that's Trump for you. Now, I know Trump he's already spoken to Putin, and he spoke to the Prime Minister of Japan, but he hasn't, as far as I know, spoken to the Prime Minister of China. And again, I mean, Trump is a businessman, he's not a politician. Maybe naively, now I know there's people behind him telling him what to do as well, but maybe naively, he's actually running this from a business point of view and not thinking about the politics behind it. Now, as I say, there's a few things that he did do that I thought, okay, that's a good move, because from a businessman point of view, I would agree with it based on my background. But as you say, if Kissinger is in the background and the neocons are in there and they're kind of pushing the buttons for Trump, well then at the end of the day, again, he's just another puppet that is going to be controlled. Steve?
Well, I think that's a general consensus. I mean, I've kind of spoke to a lot of people, and I've seen, just kind of been reading forums and stuff, and the general consensus seems to be is that Trump, they thought he was going to get in there and make some changes, but he's just, like I say, he's just a puppet. And I think the people in the background, the shadow government, I think there's been a bit of a shake-up maybe in the background, and obviously they feel that the direction that they're going is not working, because we hear from alternative media, different people in the alternative side say that things are starting to change, we're starting to make an impact, and there is a chance that we may win this thing. So I think that maybe a little bit of a shake-up has taken place in the shadow government, and I think that's all. They just wanted, they obviously didn't want to make a change in the background and then kind of have Obama go from this nice kind of everybody loves him to this tyrant. They didn't want that, so obviously they wanted a new face, and I'm guessing they kind of figured, well, who do they dislike the most in the running? Trump. Okay, let's get him in, and he'll be the tyrant. He'll do our dirty work for us. I think everyone knows that.
Because if Hillary Clinton had not stolen the nomination for the Democratic Party, we could have been seeing Bernie Sanders as the president. He was incredibly popular, actually.
Yeah.
And it's only through the Democratic National Committees, this whole ridiculous superdelegate system. I mean, I don't understand how it works, but by getting all these superdelegates on her side, Hillary Clinton managed to steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders, effectively for Donald Trump. So, this is what makes the whole thing so farcical from my point of view, is that you've got really these two, Clinton and Trump, actually conspired against the American people to rig the election and to make sure that there wasn't a candidate there who wasn't a maniac, effectively. That's what they did. Also, if you look at this whole US-China situation, I suppose what they were talking and thinking about beforehand was, look, let's try and pick off Russia. Russia, we can start to, I mean, of course, they've been trying to do this for 1,000 years or so, literally, all the way back. Russia has been the enemy of the West ever since there was this big schism between the East and the Western Church. Russia has been a thorn in the side of the Western elites, So this goes back a long way. But then, because the Russians have completely blocked the US and NATO in Ukraine, and it looks like now in Syria with the absolutely idiotic, botched coup attempt in Turkey, which has swung the Turks quietly away from NATO and the US. I mean, that's it. They really messed that one up big time. And the situation in Syria is pretty much blocked to the US as well. So they're now thinking, well, rather than pick off a few of the little ones and then go for China, why don't we go for China now and then we'll pick off the little ones? This is, I think, how infantile the actual mentality of the US is. But this does bring us to, I mean, I don't know how much you're into the whole sort of history of secret societies and that sort of thing, but the whole business of the United States being being in the grip of Freemasonry and a lot of Freemasons in political positions in the US. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, I know for a fact that even though it's all covered up and you can't really find out much about it on the internet, that Bill Clinton was a Freemason, for example, and it's very difficult to find the evidence for it. But I know because I've seen the Masonic articles in private Masonic magazines showing him in all these regalia. So the Masonic thing in the US versus China, which is the triads and the tongs, these are completely controlled system, completely controlled governments. And Kissinger's dream is to get this clash of civilizations going between the Chinese and the Americans. And it honestly looks to me as if that's what they'll be planning for the next few years. Quite how quickly it'll all happen, goodness only knows. But, I think that there's a real hatred between the elites in China and the US, but there's more of a hatred of ordinary people. So these wars are actually quite good for them in order that, they can actually get more power. So, I mean, it does sound trite, but this is what happened in the Second World War. It wasn't just, I mean, Hitler was a lose scenario. He was never really going to win, although he thought he was personally. Anyone from outside could see that, you're going to take on Russia, you're going to take on the United States, you're going to take on, Britain, etc. How on earth can you win that? But what happens is there's a consolidation of power. There's an immense amount of looting of resources and money. And, I think that could be where we're heading, towards a sort of Tongs versus Masons, enormous kind of, almost Orwellian style great conflict between these places. And because of the backdrop of the financial crisis, this is a great way to forget about all that, isn't it? All that difficult financial crisis, scratching our heads. Oh, we don't care about that anymore because we're on a war footing. And I don't know what you guys make of it, but the fact that you've got a concentration of secret societies in China and in the US is quite worrying, because it means that something can be quite easily manipulated.
Well, we've heard through the people we've interviewed on the show is that there is 5 actually factions. So if you look at it that way, globally there's 5 factions, and they're all infighting at the moment because they all want the power. Now, I think that's why we had, the Panama Papers came out there a while ago. That's one faction stitching up another faction. And what you're going to see is you're going to see more of this information coming out as they try and stitch each other up. Now, what we've been told lately is that it's now down, there's 2 factions fighting each other for control, because the Federal Reserve That was up in, I think, 2012 or 2013, the 100 years of the Federal Reserve, and the Americans were controlling that, and that had to go over to China. But now they're not allowing that to happen, or they're stopping that from happening, if memory serves me well. And then that's causing a problem, because the deal was, you have it for 100 years, and then we'll take it over, and then we'll run it again for another 100 years. But that's not, America are going, no, you're not going to get that. Or when I say America, I mean the oligarchs in America. I'm not actually talking about the American people, because USA Incorporated, it's a company. They're all companies anyway. They're not, they're not republics. So that's what we have been told is kind of going on. And maybe that's why China is throwing the toys out of the pram, because they're not handing over the control of the monetary system. And the whole thing will be, okay, now we're going to reset it and start again. And here we go, another 100 years of running a Federal Reserve fractional-based system. And I suppose if you look at it that way, if you look at that on a faction point of view, because that's what they are, they're just gangs at the top, and they want control, and that's really what it is, and they're doing what they're trying to do. Now, I know there was a couple of years ago, I seen a video of an ex-military guy who was told that in 5 years' time they'd be going into, and he had a list of countries in the Middle East, and Syria and Iran was on the list. So it doesn't surprise me that they want to move Russia away from Iran so they can go in and take over Iran and do what they need to do. They're trying to get Syria, they're trying to stitch up Assad and convince people that he's the bad guy, but apparently all the people who are there, the nationals in Syria, support Assad and what he's doing. So it's actually not working for them, and obviously, maybe the idea of getting Trump in is to mix it up a bit. Now, we've said to our American cousins, Obama used to push this exceptionalism all the time. And, we've said before on the show, listen guys, you're a great bunch of people over there in the States, but you're not exceptional. You're like everybody else. Nobody's any higher than anybody else. We're all the same. But again, as you say, Trump might be pushing that.
Yeah, I think we're going to get more and more of that, I think. And I think that would be rhetoric from the government, not from ordinary people in the US, because this is what often happens is if you've got failed policies at home, you get leaders that are pointing the finger abroad. And of course, he's been doing that with Mexico. He's been doing it with China. Already we're seeing, okay, so not with Russia. But it does create quite an interesting situation. If there is a clash between the US and China, it's less likely to bring the Europeans in, because the conflict with Russia that they were trying to stoke is much more. They basically completely failed to bring the Europeans in on that one. Is that you may end up with the Russians having quite a strong hand in that, because they would then be able to sort of tilt things maybe one way or the other. So, but at the end of the day, the really important thing to keep focused on is the Middle East, is what's happening with Jerusalem, because he's definitely wanting to move the US embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. He said I think yesterday that it was not going to be one of his first things he did, but that's definitely on the cards. And that, of course, is the beginning of the whole process of getting the Muslims out of Jerusalem. Effectively, white Europeans. I mean, it's a little bit like the settlement of Ireland, bringing the Scots and the English in to the north of Ireland. It's just completely removing the indigenous population and creating an absolute running sore for many years to come. So ordinary indigenous Arabs aren't going to be able to live in the Holy Land. This is incredibly provocative, and I think that's actually what they're trying to do, is to spark this religious war between Iran and Israel through this whole business of the recreating the Third Temple. Quite whether they're successful and how quickly it all happens, the Jerusalem business is one step on the way to that. And I noticed also the Chinese have a very strong position on this. They say that they believe that East Jerusalem, which many people don't realise, was actually occupied by the Egyptian, the Syrian, the Jordanian armies up until 1967, the Six-Day War, that East Jerusalem should be the capital of Palestine. for the Palestinians as a separate state to Israel. So the Chinese have taken a pretty strong line on all this stuff, and they're not. And I think they're as we see the US start to focus more on conflicts with China, we'll start to see more and more about what China thinks about what should happen in the world, and they do seem to be pretty reasonable, actually. I mean, they're a scary force, militarily, etc., and also they're an authoritarian regime, but they seem to be making much more sense than the West at the moment.
Yeah, well, they own a lot of assets from the US anyway.
They do, of course they do, yeah.
So they have a lot of control there. Now, I don't know how that is going to actually play out further down the line when they start asking for access to the assets.
One thing is, if Trump decides he wants to have a trade war, he's going to lose. He's going to lose.
Yeah. Well, you will, because the whole idea of everything. Now, in 2001, when I was in London, I met a guy in an employment agency, and I was talking to him, and he'd just come back from Vietnam. And he was telling me that, he said, in 10 years' time, 10 years plus, he said, you know the way loads of things have been outsourced to India and China. And I said, yeah. He said, well, what you're going to have now is you're going to have these other Far Eastern countries actually doing outsourcing to these countries because, again, the labour costs are very cheap, and Vietnam was one of them. And I think that's all kind of has transpired now because, I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose we don't want to find out that people are, being paid 50 pence a day to work in a factory. But then if you go into Penny's in Navan, or Primark over in the UK, and you get your jumper for £5, you think, wow, that's great, that's really cheap. And if you're poor, it's brilliant. But at the end of the day, somebody had to go and, make that, and there's probably some poor person in a sweat factory getting paid 50p a day.
Yes, that's true. Also, look, one thing I ought to do is let you know we've done a bit of research. I say we, some of the people who were at the Bilderberg meeting in Dresden last year, into where it's going to be this year. Have you reported on that yet? Would you like to guess where we think it's going to be?
No, we haven't actually touched base with Steve.
I'm going to say guess and say somewhere fancy in Ireland.
No, sorry.
Oh, okay.
It looks almost certain it's going to be in Washington again, in Chantilly, Virginia. I mean, there were some indications it was going to be in the US and potentially there, but then there's somebody has realised that there is a big block booking at the hotel between the 1st and the 4th of June at the Westfields Marriott Hotel, Chantilly, Virginia. I mean, anybody that wants to check that out, I wouldn't say 100% certain, because it's not been confirmed by the Bilderbergers themselves, and they, I imagine, will be doing that at some point in the near future. But if anyone is thinking of going over there, there's a really nice hotel called the Hyatt. It's not super cheap. There's very few hotels around Chantilly that are, but it does have a shuttle bus that goes backwards and forwards to where the protests are all going on, which is extremely handy. So we're trying to pick up on experience from previous years to tip people off to go to the best hotels if you want to cover the Bilderberg as a researcher, journalist, or just someone who wants to eyeball these people. My research into the Bilderbergs has been pretty comprehensive over the years, and the take I've got is that effectively you've got in there, and I'm not sure how far this filters out to others, you've got a faction within the West which basically did deals with the Nazis at the end of the Second World War. So the Nazis had looted all of the vaults of all the central banks of Europe, plus loads of other wealth, as we know, paintings, all sorts of things, securities. These things called bearer bonds, which are, basically like shares in a company which are owned by whoever holds them in their hand. So, you can use it like money, basically. And all these securities were squirreled away at the end of World War II, and by largely under the direction of Hitler's treasurer Martin Bormann, who very cleverly kind of took over access to Hitler towards the end of the war after he'd managed to get Rudolf Hess to fly out of the way, who was the only other person who was as close to Hitler as he was. And so that Nazi faction in the West included people like Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was actually, even though he was trusted supposedly by the British military, not by the Americans, by the way, He was a former SS officer. So Bernhard, people like Lord Carrington, who was part of the Operation Market Garden, and I think I found almost like the biggest penny that dropped for me was this first ever Bilderberg meeting. Why is it called Bilderberg? Well, it's at this hotel in Oosterbeek in Holland, just outside Arnhem, and this is the site in 1944 of this horrific slaughter of the British Airborne Forces, Operation Market Garden, which is in this film A Bridge Too Far. Now, what happened was the tanks, Peter Carrington, Lord Carrington, in his Grenadier Guard tanks, just basically stopped. They could easily have got to Arnhem and relieved that force, but they didn't. They just waited in Nijmegen by the bridge. Some American guy I spoke to, who was actually there, pointed his Tommy gun at Lord Carrington's head and said, "Get down the blankety-blank road now before I blow your blankety-blank head off," because they'd just taken the bridge, lost half their men nearly, taking this bridge, and Carrington rumbles across in his tank and then just sits there and won't go. He says, "Oh, well, my orders are here to wait here." "No, your guys are down the road at Arnhem and we've just taken this bridge so you can go and rescue them." But anyway, so the long and short of it was that there was a pocket of isolated British Airborne Forces behind enemy lines in Oosterbeek, and it's exactly this same place which was nicknamed the Witch's Cauldron, actually during the battle itself, where the first ever Bilderberg meeting took place. And I think it's pretty clear that that battle was deliberately thrown by the British ground forces. In fact, I was chatting to an ex-soldier, oh gosh, when was it? Must be a year or so ago now. And he said, "Oh yeah, we still remember that battle. If there's ever a meeting in the British military which involves, say, for example, infantry and ground forces and airborne forces, the airborne forces quite often will turn up early so that when the ground forces staff turn up for their meeting, they can look at their watches and say, 'You're late again,' like Arnhem." So that it's interesting, I think, that these particular individuals, there's a guy called Boyd Browning who was involved in that, and Lord Carrington, who was captain in the Grenadier Guards at the time, who was in a position to go trundle down to Arnhem and save these poor guys hanging on by their fingernails. And the reason for it all was to delay the end of the war. So they kind of, the MP, I spoke to a guy called Tony Hibbert, who was actually involved in the battle, who's died now, sadly, but he was saying how they were all convinced that the war would be over by Christmas, because this would have severed all the Nazi supply lines. It would have meant that the British troops could have gotten into the Ruhr, which was the manufacturing heart of Germany, and it would have caused massive headaches for the German defence of the country, and it didn't happen.
It's just
the war carried on, and that enabled the Nazis to squirrel their loot around the world. And of course, they had a very important thing they wanted to buy with that money after the war, along with setting up these clandestine corporations and a whole kind of Fourth Reich, a financial Fourth Reich, which was safe passage, and that's what they bought, through. With the cash after the war, they got looked after, particularly in the US. But also, I mean, you look at the pursuit of Nazi war criminals by the British and the Americans was very, very slack. It was really only up until the 1970s, it was the Israelis were the only people who were pursuing Nazi war criminals, like Adolf Eichmann, for example, and then even Issa Harel from Mossad, who was the officer that actually nabbed Eichmann, who was behind the Final Solution, and actually kidnapped him in Argentina and flew him over to Tel Aviv to be tried and executed eventually. Issa Harel, at that point, was then sacked, would you believe, for doing an amazing job of finding one of the most ruthless Nazi war criminals in the world and getting him justice for him. Issa Harel was sacked, and the message then apparently went out: no more of this, because there were Jewish people who are involved in these companies that have been set up as part of this Bormann network, this Fourth Reich network, and they said, well, look, we don't want any more of this. Yeah, so if you do any more Nazi war criminals who were hiding as part of this Fourth Reich, we will cut off the money to Israel, so don't do it. And that is almost certainly why Issa Harrell was sacked. So it's quite a long story, but the Bilderbergs, I think, are really interesting insight into, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz, what's behind the curtain, what's really driving affairs today.
It's funny that, in history, my son, and I'm sure Steve's son and daughter, doing the history, and they're told that, Adolf Hitler and his wife were killed in the bunker in Germany, when we all know, they have done so much research in this, and documentaries, and eyewitnesses of servants who served Hitler when you went to Argentina. The Germans knew, we're going a little bit off track, but they knew they were going to lose the war in 1943. So they, as you say, they got all the goods and all the gold and everything else, put it in the subs. Some of them went up to Antarctica, Mount Swabialand, and set up bases up there. And then obviously a lot of them went down to Argentina as well. And then you had Project Paperclip as well. The Americans took them. But we're going a little bit off track. We do have questions for you. We do want to talk about this missile launch that accidentally went off. I can see, I tell you what they had. There must have been Father Dougal on the actual sub. And you ever seen the series of Father Dougal's on the plane, and there's a big button there, do not press, and he's looking at it, and he's pointing with his finger, I don't know, somebody did something funny there, but we'll, do you want to talk about that before we go over to the questions?
Well, just to keep you in the picture, I've only got about 10 more minutes here, so, absolutely happy to talk about the missile.
We have another 30 minutes if you...
Yeah, I can't do that, I'm afraid. I haven't got the time. I've got to go and get something to eat.
Right, okay, no worries, okay.
The missile test, it may be that it was just an accident, it went towards the US, but you know what? A Trident missile is actually quite difficult to steer in the wrong direction. These things are pretty accurate, they're pretty difficult to make go 180 degrees in the wrong direction, and it does strike me that there's potentially, anyway, people within the Royal Navy who might be a little bit fed up with just kowtowing to US foreign policy, particularly the mess it's got them in over the years, the number of British lives, servicemen's lives that have been lost in completely vain, sort of fashion particularly in the Middle East, etc. And that they may have just done this to take the mickey. Also, of course, that the US are supposed to be able to control where these things go, aren't they? Because it's US technology, apparently it's not even really an independent nuclear deterrent. So, there's all sorts of questions here about, did the US make it go in the wrong direction themselves on purpose? Did the Royal Navy make this missile head over towards the US instead of down towards Africa? But it's certainly, it is really appalling that it's been so utterly covered up for 6-8 months. Particularly because we need to know whether this missile system is going to work. It looks to me as if it's some kind of tin pot. With £40 billion apparently we're spending on this thing. Unbelievable amount of money.
And at the interview, I think, with Theresa May when she was on the BBC, she was again using the politician's answer. She just... I don't want to. I'm not too sure who the actual presenter was, but he kept pushing it. He said, "Did you know about it? Did you know about it?" And she just kept skirting around and just talking about other stuff, or about what she had her perception of what happened.
I think it was the Americans that leaked it to the Times, as far as I know. Difficult to be 100% sure about that, but I can see to a certain extent why she would not want to say, especially if a question is sprung on her like that. That's part of her job, is to just avoid answering the question. A little bit like all this stuff to do with, actually I wasn't totally surprised, the stuff over the last day or so to do with Trump announcing blocks on the refugees. She didn't answer that question straight away. She can't just speak, she's not like a monarch or something. She's got to talk to the Foreign Secretary, she's got to talk to the Foreign Office, she's got to talk to, a whole bunch of, but most of her cabinet probably, to get actually decision about what is the British position on this. And I don't think it's really entirely fair to ask her immediately for a position and to come up with it, especially when it's a controversial thing which might go against US policy. Effectively, to ask her to have a pop at the emperor in our little empire, Britain and Ireland, of course, and most of Europe and various other parts of the world that vote with the United States at the United Nations. We are vassal states, and we've got to be rather careful before we take a pop at the emperor.
Exactly. We have a couple of questions here. I don't know whether you have time to answer them, but there are listeners that have asked questions for you.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Okay, well, there are a couple of comments. I won't actually. I'll just go straight to one of the questions because I think it's important. But Joan is wondering, Tony, how do you see Brexit and the US on trade? What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, a weak position actually, because we desperately need a good deal from the US. The US doesn't really. So I think we're hoping we've almost like put all of our chips on that one US deal. The other thing to mention here is, look, what is the point of wresting our sovereignty away from Brussels just to kind of start again counter? A lot of the Europeans are very pleased to see us go, will be very pleased to see us go, because they've always seen us as just a Trojan horse for the US, and also, for the City of London, which has been just a bit about people making, the mega rich making loads of money. It's not been good for the European Union. Actually, it may help having no Britons sitting around the table vetoing things. I was discussing this one on the radio the other day, and there was a reform the Irish brought. I think it was an Irish agriculture commissioner at the EU, brought a really good reform to the common agricultural policy, which was we will only subsidise individual farmers up to a certain amount of acreage. After that, then it's up to them. And this is obviously very sensible, because it means that small struggling farmers are helped, and these massive landowners like the Duke of Westminster, Duke of Buccleuch, etc., they only get the same subsidy as a farmer with 300 or 400 acres. It's a very, very sensible idea. What we're doing is we're giving millions of pounds in cap subsidies to these massive landowners who've had their land for like 700-800 years. An absolute joke. Some of the richest people in the land on benefits of £1 million a year. They don't even have to go and sign on for it, So I think this is an aberration. So the British vetoed that, at the EU, so that people in the European Union will be very pleased to see the back of the English. I can tell you that. But I think the idea of going more and more closer to the United States is a dangerous one. You look at the standards, food standards, financial regulation standards. A lot of standards in the US are far worse. So in a way, it might be like swiveling away from one empire into the hands of another empire. But of course, they're both part of the same bloc. So I don't know how much difference it's going to make. It's certainly going to be interesting being able to make our own laws again. That will be, particularly if we get a more radical government, as if Theresa May carries on down this road of feeding the rich and starving the poor, we may well get a Jeremy Corbyn government, something like that, which could be really interesting.
Yeah, just going back to when you mentioned about the food, and I think that's a very important thing, because I know there's certain ingredients that are not allowed, they're banned in Europe because they're known to be carcinogens. But over in the US of A, they're a lot of these ingredients they're put into food, and there's no problems. It's thumbs up by the FDA. And I suppose if this goes ahead and the UK start importing a lot more foodstuffs from the US, well then, only bad things could happen. And then if there is going to be any dealings between Ireland and the UK, well, I'm guessing then obviously a lot of these foodstuffs, whatever they may be, could spill into Ireland as well, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of unhappy people there. But that aside, what do you think will happen? I know this article is supposed to be triggered in March. Do you think it will go ahead, or do you think something may happen? Because I know they did want, was it the House of Lords, or they wanted somebody over there in the UK to vote on it, and they were kind of
Well, look, when the Tory party is determined to do something, usually it happens, and the Tory party is determined on this, and it may be for the wrong reasons that the Conservatives have decided that they don't want to have anything to do with Brussels anymore. That is to say that Brussels stops them fleecing the poor, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it does mean that we're more of a sovereign country. That is, even if things do go bad in Britain, as they probably will under the Tories, it's almost inevitable for ordinary folk. It at least gives us a chance to change things in the future. But under the EU system, there really is no chance. It's like being part of a giant machine that is just relentlessly changing things in the interests of big corporations, allowing big corporations to write the laws. And also when the financial crisis came, back in, it was the bailout, wasn't it, in 2008, I could not believe the list of people that the Brussels put in charge of the review of how we can better regulate the finances. Well, of course, it was the same banks that had caused the crash, or it wasn't a crash, the bailout in the first place. And that is a real model that we're seeing. It's a kind of feudal system. Actually, that's really what's going on, isn't it? You've got a bunch of people who are extremely powerful, mostly behind the scenes, and they have a kind of bunch of puppets that go on TV and talk for them. But at the end of the day, they're slowly but surely aggrandizing power to themselves and becoming completely invulnerable to any kind of prosecution or any sort of rule of law. And at least if you're, the Italians have tried to do this in Venice. They had a referendum to secede away from the Italian government. In Catalonia they had the same thing. In Spain, people are starting to get really fed up with the way that the Brussels machine is trying to form this United States of Europe with a European army without actually really asking anybody, the 800 million people, so.
It is madness. We've seen a video that was posted up by one of our MEPs in Ireland, and there was complete frustration on everybody. Well, listen, Tony, we're not going to keep you any longer because I know you're busy. You have to go and get your dinner and stuff like that. Thanks a lot for coming on. Much appreciated. I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your communication details and where people can find you. Steve.
Yeah, Tony, thanks very much for giving us your time this evening. Sorry you're having a late dinner. But in the meantime, if anyone else wants to find out more about you, as we said before, or if they want to check out your live show, can you tell us where they can do that and when are you on live?
Yeah, well, I'm on Bristol Community FM. That's bcfmradio.com/politics. So you can go to the listen again there. But if you want to comment and you want to get the links from our weekly radio shows, go to thisweek.org.uk and you can download an MP3 there and listen in the car or wherever you want. Nice and portable program. For example, this week we did a whole thing about self-build, which is great. It's just like people actually designing their own spaces to live in, and you don't need a mint to do it either, because the self-build people in Britain have quite cleverly forced every local authority to create lists so anybody can sign up. You don't even have to have any money to do it, saying that they might in some point in the future like to self-build their own home. And then the local authorities have to provide land plots for them to do it. So this is hardly known about, but it's starting to be a kind of self-build revolution, which is a great way of building your way out of a housing crisis when quite a lot of the people have got skills to build, but they don't have jobs, So give them a bit of land and let them build somewhere. So this is, I think, going to be getting bigger in the future. You'll see more and more people doing this. And so we had a whole thing about that on Friday, plus some of the stuff we've been chatting about here. But that's on thisweek.org.uk. I've got bilderberg.org as well, which is a whole load of background on the Bilderbergers and the research I've done over the years into that. Plus there's a YouTube, if you're interested in the whole sort of history, origins of the Bilderberg group and the links to the Nazis. There's a YouTube film Dave Barmby, who's a UKIP activist, and I did a few years ago. That's called A Bridge Not Far, which is a sort of parody on the Bridge Too Far thing, because it isn't. It was only about a 20-minute drive away, it's too far. And then finally, there's the 9/11 forum, which people can register on and join and have a look at that if they want to. And that we did. We started as a 9/11 truth movement in Britain back in about 2004, 2005, and it's been going ever since, really. Every time there's some big terrorist attack, we get everybody on there chatting about it, saying what we think's really going on. and analysing all sorts of other stuff, like the things like your ayahuasca we were talking about earlier on. Getting into all sorts of subjects which are not really being covered properly by the mainstream press.
Excellent. That's brilliant. Well, we'll put out all the details on our chat room. And again, Tony, thanks for coming on. Just stay with us there for a minute. We'll just go off to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMIreland.com.
Okay, we're back. That was Tony Gosling, the previous guest. And sorry he had to go. I know he was giving some great information, but his dinner was ready, and we can't stand between a man and his stomach.
No, you can't do that. But we are glad to say we have Thomas Williams from the Truth, Honour and Integrity show coming on. And we're going to talk to Thomas about Trump and what's going on, because Thomas is obviously based in Florida, and he's seeing a lot of things that are going on there. And I think it's very important to talk about this, because Trump is going to have a massive effect globally, and we were talking to Tony about it earlier on, about things that are going on. So why not get Thomas on to get some inside information as to what might be happening. Good evening, Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for coming on. Last minute, no, it's lastminute.com, but appreciate you coming on. I'm sure, obviously, from your perspective, what's going on with Trump. We've talked about this when we've had you on the show before. You felt that Trump was controlled, that he wasn't supposed to win. And then when the realisation of him winning, he kind of crapped himself. And now he's signing executive orders left, right and centre. The Dakota pipeline is back up and running, and people are giving out about that. And then he's doing the stopping all the refugees coming in after they're kind of bombing the hell in the Middle East. And destroying their lands, but not letting them in. So what's your take on what's happening? What's the update?
Well, it wasn't the Russians that intervened in the election. It was agency people. And the alternative was that Hilary, the premise was that Hilary was going to win. And this is why I said on my show and the previous shows I'm involved with, that Hilary would win, because that was the cabal choice. Now, in the meantime, it became more obvious that the division within the factions was increasing, and it wasn't suiting certain factions. And so the choice was made to remove a whole heap of the vote rigging machines that were stacked in Hillary's favour from the Friday through to the Tuesday morning of the election. So it became quite clear, certainly by Sunday, that Hilary wasn't going to win, because her machines were removed. I did get on the ground confirmation that there were certain ones removed from Pennsylvania on the Tuesday morning, and that ended any chance of Hilary had of winning.
So let's just clarify that. So they were vote machines which were programmed to make sure that Hilary won. So it was corrupt from the start.
All elections are corrupt.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh it doesn't make me laugh, it makes me mad actually, when you've got news media complaining that the Russians were involved in rigging America's election. And the irony of that is not lost, since as the CIA has rigged 81 elections in the last 60 years.
Wow. Well, it doesn't surprise us. In Ireland, it's the same. I've no compunction to say that we feel that the Irish elections are in some way set up, because if we look at, so-called democracy, Steve, isn't it 30% or somebody of the people in Ireland voted for the party? It was because loads of people just said, look, I'm not going to vote. It's a waste of time. We get the same parasites in all the time, and it's all rigged and set up, in their favour. But so what's the story with the factions now, Thomas? Is there still 5 factions, or are we down to the 2, or what's going on?
Well, in essence, there's more, because the factions infighting has increased exponentially. It's getting out of hand. From their point of view, from our point of view, it's fantastic, because it's breaking their structure down more and more as they all fight for control of the planet. be it the financial or political or what other agendas they have. And so this is what's going to take place, whereby they're throwing each other under the bus via media and newspapers, depending on which particular faction owns which particular paper or radio station or TV station. Trump is aligned with the Zionist movement. He always was and always will be. That's why he is in bed with AIPAC. That's why less than a week after he's in, Netanyahu, or nutty asshole as I call him, suddenly decides he can build illegal houses on settlements again, because he had the support of Trump. He said it in a political statement, let's wait until Trump gets in and then we'll start rebuilding again, which goes against World Council rule. And so this is not pleasing the Nazi aspect, which is the Project Paperclip crew,
Yeah.
still operating. That's been largely controlling the agencies here and the UK.
Do you know what's happening in Antarctica? Because there seems to be an awful lot of talk of that. Now, we know Buzz Aldrin went up there. He went up, and Kerry went up there, and a few of them went up there. And William Tompkinson, a high-level, top-secret, well, I suppose, I don't know whether you call him an engineer, but Kerry Cassidy interviewed a chap called William Tompkinson, and he's on YouTube, and he has a book out called Selected by Extraterrestrials, and he talks about his secret space program and all the stuff that he worked on. And one of the things he said was, and he's not a Mason, and he said before they actually did the one step for man, one another joint leap for mankind, they actually came out of the ship. This is what he said. They came out of the I think it was an Apollo mission. They came out, they stepped out of the ship, took a photo of him standing with a Masonic regalia, and then went back in the ship and then did the one step for mankind, but they'd already come out of the ship and taken a photo. And you think, why? And he said, why are the Masons involved with the whole landing on the moon thing? So there's obviously something going on with Antarctica and all. Have you heard anything?
I feel that Antarctica's there's stuff going on. There's always been stuff going on in Antarctica. It was part of a number of different ET groups, particularly ones linked with the Nazi group, which is why Hitler and co went down there after the war ended. Of course, Hitler then went on to Argentina. It's the idea that suddenly that the media are promoting all these known people are going there smacks of distraction to me.
Yeah.
I don't think they're allowed anywhere near it. My knowledge is where the active area is. The whole area is domed, so you can't gain access. And that's what I've come across also. These domed cities that I've met on my own show, you can't see it. For those of you who have watched the series Divergent, where there's a central control system and you can't gain access to that city because there's a glass wall that you can only see or when you approach it. That's the type of technology we're talking about. There's too much media promotion of it smacks to me of distraction for something else. That's just my opinion on it. But there's always been stuff going on down there.
Do you think there's
a lot of it is...
Do you think there's some sleight of hand going on that obviously the big distraction, because Trump is definitely a big distraction at the moment with everything that's going on, and we kind of have to watch what's happening in the background because of it.
Well, I did the show on Thursday and I was rather critical of Trump, and I've now got even more evidence of skullduggery, where he's now his main advisor is Eric Prince, who's the founder of the Blackwater Mercenary Group. his Eric Prince's sister, Betsy DeVos, is one of his advisors that got ripped to shreds by Elizabeth Warren in the House or Senate meeting this week. She didn't have a clue what she was talking about. And this aligned with the 3 Goldman Sachs appointees does not augur too well. He's also appointed a guy called Bannon, who's basically a white supremacist, member of the Breitbart group, and another guy called Smith, I think his name is, who's another one who's linked with Blackwater. Then became known as Z and Academy. Well, these are the clowns that are causing all the mayhem in Ukraine and the Middle East. Is that who we, does that smack of being beneficial to the people of America? Not to me, it doesn't. But I knew all along about Trump. But others, sadly, have seen him as the saviour.
It's a bit concerning.
You can't have a saviour in their system.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning. We went to see David Icke last week. We were gifted 2 tickets, so we went along. And David did say about this, I won't say planet, I'll say a copy of reality, which was taken over, maybe by the AI or whoever, and they are destined, or the plan of attack is to destroy everything. That's just all they know. It's destroy, destroy, destroy. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, I'm seeing more and more people talking about the extinction level on the planet regarding animals, the die-off of animals and what's going on. It's just unbelievable. And nobody's saying anything. The mainstream media are not saying anything, obviously, because they don't tell people. And I just think, this year, I don't know, maybe this year maybe make or break, because I've never ever seen the world in a position that it is at the moment, with everything that's going on.
Well, nothing in essence has changed except the onion's being revealed.
Yeah.
And people are now seeing the layers of the onion. Most people didn't realise the onion actually existed. Now they're seeing the layers being peeled back of reality, or what is perceived as reality. The more you look deeper into it, the more perhaps you'll come to realise there's some sort of a hostile style takeover of this planet. That's why we've got nanoparticles, genetic engineering. My argument is, well, most of the cabal, there are elements that aren't. Most of the cabal are humans, so why would humans poison the air or the food and the water when they've all got to breathe and drink and eat? And the only reason, only common sense thing is it's for somebody or something else.
Yeah.
I've mentioned recently in my own shows about the synthetics, which is with counterfeit, that were being taken over by a robotic style race, and eventually, of course, they won't need humans, and this runs into the transhumanism agenda, and why I keep warning people about being careful with technology. We have failed as a species in the past when we've got to the technological area where we can advance, not only go to the stars, etc., but advance as a species, and we got shut down. Certainly the last 2 loops.
Yeah.
With the Atlantean War and also the forced flood that everyone's familiar with. It was deliberate. We've reached a technological age, and somewhere doesn't want humanity progressing beyond that, and then we send us back to the Stone Age. They won't prevail this time, so for those of your listeners who may be concerned about this, don't be. We will prevail. A lot of their programs and projects have been blocked, and they keep failing. But it's important that people grasp that what they perceive as science fiction and well into the future is actually in our past, not our future. It's the past and now, and people have got to do a lot more research and understanding of where we're at technologically, because, well, you know, people go, oh, we've made massive strides, you know, it's only 30, 40 years ago we were still having dial, you know, the circular phones, and look what we've got now. Well, trust me, the way ahead. They had laptops in the jungles.
Yeah, well,
Wi-Fi laptops in the jungles back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
And yet, laptops and Wi-Fi is the last 10, 15, 20 years.
well, I have to refer to Ben Rich's book, The Skunk Works, when he says he has the technology to bring ET home. I mean, they have advanced technology, way advanced, but they won't release. Well, maybe now it's going to be coming out. Now, one of the things that you said on the show was that the indigenous tribes there'd be a big celebration, maybe a public celebration, where that would be kind of part of the big day, the big disclosure. I know that was kind of planned before December, or up to December, and can you tell us why that was a delay in that, or is it going to take place?
I'm still of the understanding it will take place. The problem being now is we have to rout out the rogue elements in the tribal people. Certain prominent Native American groups are being run by the Nazis. But also a lot of the ancient Native American groups, like the Hopi, were dealing with reptilians in the past, and that's where their alliances are. And we have to be very careful in thinking that they're all very spiritual and knowledgeable. Yes, many of them are, but the top hats of those groups are working for the Nazis. And that's the problem we're having now, is that they've been given sovereignty of the land back, but they want total sovereignty and think they can protect themselves. Well, given that we know there's rogue elements in it, you know, two of the main tribal chiefs in one of the groups, one of them lives in Scotland and the other lives in London. Well, that's really Native American, isn't it?
Mm.
You know, and now that they're pushing the US government for even more stringent sovereignty acts, which then leaves them vulnerable to take over from rogue groups, or sets them up to be taken over by rogue groups who are already ensconced within that tribe.
Where do you see 2017? I mean, we're coming at the end of January now. I mean, we've got 2 days left before we're into February. And how do you see 2017 revealing itself?
Well, it's unraveling. It's unraveling at a pace where more and more people are going to start seeing through the illusion. Sadly, more and more people are losing it, which was forecast. Some just can't handle the frequencies in here that's currently permeating right through the planet and around. Maybe I kind of regretted giving the figure out of only 10 to 12% of living souls. It may be more than that. I certainly hope so. But I think we're going to start seeing a split more and more between people who just live outside that side of reality. Well, more and more are stepping outside of the matrix and seeing through it.
Well, I was going...
More than
staying
ensconced in it. You know.
Well, I was going to say this later on, but as you're on, I'm going to say it now. Because I am seeing this going on, and I don't know whether you, Steve, you've seen this or experienced this. I want to get your take on it as well. The changes that are taking place now, I know you gave out the figure 10 to 12%, but Simon Parkes, Paddy Prasad and Dr. Joseph Cipollone also gave out roughly them figures anyway, Thomas. So you're not alone. They gave out roughly the same amount. So you're not on your own there. They all said the same thing. They all have their...
It becomes a bit frightening for people to think that, 80-90% are not real.
Yeah.
It is a bit daunting and a bit intimidating. But then you look at it the other way. You know, they've tried everything to wipe us out. We're all still here. Yes, many of us are suffering financially or other reasons. But now is, I always like to give it a positive angle, not to be like mask over it and ignore it. But you can always turn bad into good.
Yeah, of course.
Use it as a learning curve and go, like, you know what? The people I'm with now, the people that listen to your shows, have stepped outside of their reality. And the people who listen to our shows and others, let's all support each other, because we are all you've got.
Exactly.
Don't be relying on Trump or anybody else in the political system to fix things for you. They're just not. They're not there to fix things for you. They're there to look after and line their own pockets and fiddle with kids and all the other stuff they get up to.
Well,
it's time for us to coalesce with what we have, combine it together and build together and create our own system outside of theirs and go to them, you know what, go and F yourselves, we don't need you.
Well, here's what I was going to say, right, and Steve, I want to get your comment on this, right. I've noticed that people who I've, a few years ago, over the years, that I would have known, have moved away. Either I haven't seen them, or they might be on Facebook, not really on email, but more so on Facebook. And they're there, but they're not there, if you know what I mean. And, which is very strange. Now, I'll tell you what happened during the week. As some people, I don't know whether it's an energy thing or people are moving away. One lady who I used to know well, and we used to see each other on a regular basis for our coffee and a catch up, and the kids used to play with each other and stuff like that. I bumped into her when I was doing my shopping the other day, and I hadn't seen her for a while. But you know, it felt like she was like a neighbour who I'd see now and again. You know, I wasn't, how you doing? 'Cause I haven't seen you in a while. It was more like it's a neighbour that you see every now and again. You go, oh hi, and it was like, you know, and I'm thinking, what's the issue? What's the problem here? So I just let it go. I said, how you doing? And then carried on doing what I was doing. But I just kind of noticed, I thought, that's very strange, because here's someone that I knew quite well, and we used to see each other on a regular basis, and the kids used to play with each other, and then we haven't seen her for a while, and then all of a sudden it's like she's a complete stranger, or somebody I've just seen. And more people seem to be dropping away. And Steve, sorry, I'm just going to get Steve's take on that, and then we'll get you in there, Thomas.
I was just going to say, maybe it's that second hedge you've grown.
Yeah, it must be the aftershave.
Yeah. No, I can't say I've experienced it myself. I have experienced whereby people would have been in my extended circle of friends. You know, I know you say about the 6 closest people, but I mean, let's double that and say 12. I would have had certain people in the 12, and we would have been close. We would have communicated. Maybe not on a daily basis, maybe not even on a weekly basis, but you know, definitely a couple of times throughout the year, and not just not just holidays. But yeah, certain people kind of have kind of gone away, and but I have to say those gaps have been filled. You know, those positions have been filled in you know, people around me that.
But resonating on the same frequency as you, though.
Oh, the people who have filled it will be kind of people who will be more in tune to what we would believe.
This is what's happening. As you increase your own vibrational frequency, the ones that are in tune with it are going to fall away. Yeah. Synthetics can't tune into anything. This is why so many of them appear to be completely out of touch with reality, because they are. Now, the living souls, eventually, we're hoping to get as many of them together in one with what I would call a public event via the media that's going to shape the last few out of the synthetic reality and in with the living souls that are still left in here. Now, as you raise your own vibrational frequency, like finds like, and this is the two worlds. So there's going to be ones that fall away. And this is why I warned 2 years ago, don't be worried if it's your family members or your loved ones. They're not. They may be your loved ones in this lifetime, but they're not on your soul journey, and that's the difference. This is what's taking place, and like-minded souls are finding like-minded souls. And as some leave, more will leave than those that arrive, and more will hook up with each other, the ones that are on a certain vibrational frequency, and that's what's taking place.
Are we at 100% at the moment with the energy?
No, 93.
93. When do you think we're going to hit the 100, and when? Do you know?
I don't know any dates.
Right. Okay.
It's increasing, and this is why many of the others are falling away. They can't handle it, because as we go from inorganic, which is synthetic, to organic, which is natural, those are going to fall away.
So what's going to be the process? Well, are we going to see anything physically, or how do we know?
Well, at the moment, people are feeling it on an energetic level. I can't say I have all the answers on what will happen physically. I can guess at it, because if it's just a hologram, then the hologram will fall away, and that's what I suspect will happen. And you'll see a lot of people and a lot of animals, a lot of beings disappear. The theory is correct on the holographic universe. They weren't real to begin with.
Yeah.
They were just distractions in here to mess with our heads. Or, you could look at it a different way, they're there to teach us to be stronger as creators.
Okay.
So you can always get lessons from the dark. They're your best lessons. You learn from the dark. Well, if those were in here to push us to the limit, then boy, if we had some lessons.
Yeah.
And the key is coming through it all, remaining true to yourself, remaining sovereign to yourself, and standing in your own sovereignty, and never put anyone else above anybody else.
Yeah.
Because we're all equal anyway.
It's it's trying times for a lot of people. I mean, for some people, they're not even seeing anything. Life just goes on.
But they can't. They're a program. This is what I have issues, with speaking to different people about the AI.
Yeah.
When we find out who and what we are, the idea of a crown of creation being needing a machine to tell them what to do is absurd to me.
Mm.
And like all programs, they can be done for beneficial. But as we found out, mainly on this planet, every bit of tech is used for weaponry.
Yeah. Or
negative connotations.
Yeah.
So this is why we have to be careful about asking for new tech, because we've failed it down this path before, whether it's because of an outside influence or it's because we've been taught wrongly on how to use it. Remains to be seen. But we have to be careful about going down this tech route, because that is what the controllers want, transhumanism.
Yeah, we have to be careful on that one, definitely. When we've heard that time and time again, especially with the likes of the chemtrails and stuff. Well, Thomas, listen, thanks a lot for coming on. Much appreciated. Oh, we have a few questions for us before we let you go.
Jeez, you can't let the man go without a question.
Oh, we have to have the questions. Questions.
Yeah, a quick one from Chris. Chris is wondering, Thomas, can you just give clarification? Is Thomas saying that lots of people here are not real and don't have souls, they are just here to populate the illusion?
Yes.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. That's what I kind of suspected, because we've been down this road before. I don't know if you've heard this, Thomas, but Joan on the chat room, she just said, this afternoon at Shannon Airport here in Ireland, no passengers from Syria, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Yemen, Somalia or Sudan are being allowed board any commercial flights from Shannon to the USA, primarily because They are Muslims, it says. Strict security checks are being imposed by the US security clearance officials at Shannon. I don't know, have you heard that information?
Yes, it is correct. And that and the idiocy of building walls smacks of Nazi Germany, does it not?
Oh, of course. Big time. Got another one?
Yes, we have one from John come in earlier. So John was wondering, has Antarctica something to do with opening portholes, and does CERN have anything to do with that, Thomas?
CERN failed. CERN, like you don't hear it mentioned no more because it's not putting the fear out that they want to promote to the people. It was killed in the August of 2015. Finally, in essence, it was dead after December 2012, which was the original opening. So CERN is not an issue. Yes, there are portals into Antarctica, but as I understand, all portals, stargates, wormholes are being cut off to this planet until further notice.
Okay, that's interesting.
Okay, well that's good news.
Just a very last one then. Chris is wondering, do you think that the whole Trump fiasco is a distraction for some non-human developments that might be happening?
It's possible. There's a number of things. It's what Trump and US politics currently is faction war. He's operating for the Zionists, and Hilary, as I call her, was operating for the Nazis. They were the two main controllers left after the Jesuits got taken out in 2013.
Alright, so faction war, so just keep an open mind. And
war. That's all it is. Total faction war. And we're going to get disclosure because they're throwing each other under the bus. We're going to get massive amounts of disclosure of not necessarily the ET side of it, but the ordinary government level politics and pedophilia. When the pedophilia one breaks, and you think Pizzagate is big, it's nothing compared to the main one. Once that breaks, then all hell breaks loose.
Right, okay.
Then no one's under any illusion of what's really going on.
I'm not sure what people will do with the information, though. You know, I mean, if it does it all come out in the mainstream media? I mean,
it has been.
I know, but is that going to like just cause society to just fall apart, or just cause riots, or you know, is that playing into their game?
This is why I've been telling people since May of 2015. Do your inner work, do your shadow work, clear all the trauma out of you, let it go, forgive yourself and forgive whoever, if it was done to you, forgive them also and release it, let it go. Then you're able to absorb more of the wave frequencies that's coming in from the galactic central core, or the central sun, which is beneficial. Then you don't get overloaded. If you've got trauma and you're adding trauma because and fear because all this information is coming out, you're going to overload yourself, and your brain's going to go into mind chatter that you can't control.
Yeah, definitely.
Do meditation. Meditation, the whole essence of meditation is cancelling the mind chatter, which is largely the reptilian portion of our brain.
No, I totally agree. The meditation is definitely something that we need to focus on. All right, Thomas, we'll let you go. We just have to wind up the show. Take care of yourself. And Steve, if you want to get Thomas's details, because Thomas has a show on later on today.
Excellent. Okay, Thomas, without further ado, give us all your details, how people can find out more about you, and when you're going to be on live.
We're on at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. Where is it? Let me just get the link, the speaker link. Oh my God. I'll find it in a minute. Right.
Well, if anyone goes on...
We're on at 7 p.m. If you go to Spreaker.com/user/8955881. User/8955881. And you'll be able to find the link from there. And as I say, we'll have Lily Earthling on tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which is midnight in Ireland.
Brilliant stuff.
But the archive will be up tomorrow anyway.
And if anybody is not sure of that link, just email us, and not too late tonight because I go to bed early. I will send you an email with the link. Thomas, thanks for coming on, much appreciated. And we'll go to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMIreland.com.
Thanks for Thomas for jumping in there and giving us an update. Next week we have, the first time on the show, we have a Catholic bishop, a Bishop Williamson. Well, that's the plan anyway, and we'll always say that's the plan because you never know these days. The guests seem to be quite erratic every now and again, you know, and so we'll just say that's the plan, but we'll see what happens next week, alright? But that will be the first time that we've had a bishop on the show, so that's going to be interesting. We're going to be talking about Fatima, Garabandal, the Rapture, the New World Order, and all that, everything that's going on. He's open-minded, and he's aware of what's going on. We're going to be talking all about that. So if that really floats your boat, tune in next week.
As we did say, we're not going to be bashing the bishop.
I knew you had to say it. You had to say it.
Okay, we're not going to be bashing the bishop.
Okay, we're not going to.
No bishop bashing will be
okay.
done.
Now I have a theory which I've been theorising, and
about bishops,
about bishops, and I have no kind of objective research done on this, but I'm going to put it out there anyway, and let people have a think about it, and then see where we go. Right, we talked before about us as animals, basically Homo sapiens, basically that we have 4 different zones around us, territories like animals do. We have our public zone, our social zone, our friendship zone, and our private zone. Now, we also have as Steve mentioned earlier, a circle of the 6 closest people around us, and maybe there's another circle around that with 12 people, and another circle around that going up to 18 people. And as the circles go out, they're people that the 6 people that are closest to you would be people that you probably see near enough every day or around that. Then the next circle would be people you might see once a week, and then the next circle once a month, the next circle once a year. Now, when you look at energy and respect for each other, and you ask somebody to say, oh look, can you do me a favour, can you do this for me? I'm kind of theorising that, is it a case that depending on how close you are and which circle that you're in will depend on how quick that person does that for you, or if they do it for you? Because if somebody that you very rarely see asks you to do something, you probably, I don't know, maybe due to energy and respect, I don't know, would probably do it less quicker if you do it than somebody who you see every day. So if your partner asks you to do something, chances are you'd probably do it quicker than somebody that that you only know, that you've only seen, every month or every few months. So it's something that I'm just theorising at the moment, and I'm just kind of researching and looking into it, and you're going
to be doing a TED Talk on it, aren't you?
Well, this is not a TED Talk, no, an Alan Talk on it. But I'm just theorising the idea because of, because we've all had people in our lives, and you get some people say, look, can you do me a favour? And they'll do you a favour, but it might take a few days to get done, where if you ask somebody closer to you, you ask them, can you do me a favour, and they'll do it quicker. And I'm just kind of theorising the whole energy thing, and how we work, and how we associate with each other, and our friendship zone, and our social zone, and our public zone. And it's just an idea that I'm throwing around. As I say, I've nothing objective. It's more subjective than objective, because I've no research on it. But I just, again, it's just focusing on the whole energy thing. And I just wanted to I was just going to put that out there. The other thing that I come across on it time and time again, and we've been asked actually to do a talk in September. No point talking about it now, revealing it now, because it hasn't been confirmed, it hasn't been booked in. But myself and Steve said we'd be happy to do a talk. And we're going to be talking about the psychology of waking up and all that kind of stuff, which we normally talk about. And also, we'll be mentioning the whole idea of the teenager mind versus the adult mind. where the teenager mind is me, what about me, me, where the adult mind is more about, well, how can I help you? And it's age, it's nothing about age. It's, you can be in your 70s and 80s and still have a teenage mind. So it's nothing got to do with age. It's got to do with, the whole perception of your reality and whether you've moved on from the teenage mind. Some of the information that Dave Icke spoke about on Saturday was interesting regarding belief systems and everything else we found interesting. So I thought it was a good day, although you had a numb, didn't you?
I'm still getting daily dressings done on my rear end. Yeah, my wife is updating those on a daily basis and rubbing me with copious amounts of pseudo cream. Anyway, just what you said about the what you're theorizing and the 6 people, and I've actually had people in my life that would have been part of the 6. If you want to look at it like rings around something, I've had people who've been part of the 6. And then, through no fault of my own, but because of changes in maybe their frequency or whatever, they've moved into either the next ring or the ring after that. But yet, when they want something done, something that they know I can help them with, they come to me and expect me to drop everything that I'm doing and oblige them because, they used to be once in the original 6. And they think, oh yeah, I'll just ask him. And a lot of times, anyone in the 6, if I can do anything for them, I will. But I've noticed that people who've moved away and wouldn't be, as close, and if I contact them and they may not get back to me, then when they want something, they'll get back, they'll come to me. And I have noticed that there are times when I will help them, and there are times when I go, well, hang on a second, does it suit me?
Can I add?
I won't.
Can I add this? I've got 2 sayings here which I think people should, if you want to take on board. And the saying is, some people are not loyal to you. They are loyal to their need for you, a need of you. Once their needs change, so does their loyalty. So the loyalty, it's not the loyal to you, they're loyal to what you can do for them. All right, which is what you just said, right? And the other thing is, also, if people want to be in your life, they will take the energy and make the effort to be in your life. If they do not want to be in your life, they will not make the effort. So if you're the one who's doing all the contacting and making arrangements and going to them, then obviously they don't really want you in their life, because if they do want you in their life, they will also make the effort. And I can kind of relate to that as well, where there's people who, they're nice people, the certain person I'm thinking of is a nice person to talk to, and they're pretty open-minded and spiritual, but they never make the effort. So I think that's something as well that you have to kind of cut the ties. And I think, like, if you're not prepared to make the effort, then why should I bother? And you might have people in your life that you are doing that to as well, that you're making all the effort. Don't. It's not worth it. It has to be mutual. It has to be, the energy has to be, work both ways. But anyway, so does that add into your little thing?
Sums it up in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Okay, we have to go. Right, so we have Bishop Williamson on next week. That should be interesting. Take care. For myself, Alan James, take it easy. If you have any info, let us know. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, stay tuned if you want more intellectual conversation, stimulating conversation. Vin is going to be up next from PIR. As Alan said, we will have Bishop Brennan from Craggy Island on next week. If we can't get the original Bishop, we'll have somebody on. Okay, for myself, Stephen George, take care. Love to you all. We'll catch you next week.
Open your mind.